What if the biggest battle of Shedeur Sanders' career isn't on the field, but inside his own locker room, before the season even starts? Because before a single snap is taken, before Todd Monken even finishes installing his offense in Cleveland, a war of ideas has already been declared around Shedeur Sanders. Not by coaches, not by teammates, but by voices in the media telling him how to think, who to trust, and whether authority is something to embrace or something to fight. Shedeur Sanders is stepping into his sophomore year with the Cleveland Browns at a moment of total upheaval. The franchise fired Kevin Stefanski after 6 seasons that produced a 45-56 record, only 2 playoff appearances, and a feeling that Cleveland was stuck in neutral. In his place, the Browns turned to Todd Monken, the architect behind some of the most explosive offenses in recent NFL memory. Monken arrives with a reputation as a quarterback developer, a tactician, and a demanding authority figure. And almost immediately, the conversation stopped being about playbooks and progressions and turned into something far more volatile. Before Shedeur could even speak publicly about his new coach, Emmanuel Acho dropped a message that lit social media on fire. Acho questioned why Shedeur Sanders should listen to Todd Monken at all. It wasn't framed as a simple football disagreement. It came across as a challenge to the very idea of submitting to a head coach's authority. And that's when the conversation took a hard turn. Jason Whitlock didn't just disagree with Emmanuel Acho. He went straight for the foundation of the argument. Whitlock accused Acho of pushing what he called a message of rebellion, comparing it to the same mindset he believes was popularized by the Black Lives Matter movement. According to Whitlock, this wasn't about protecting a young quarterback. It was about encouraging defiance for applause. Whitlock didn't mince words. He said Emmanuel Acho was trying to tell Shedeur Sanders and young black players to rebel against Todd Monken. He said Acho thought the message would win over social media, but instead it failed miserably. And then Whitlock took it a step further, laying out his belief that the quarterback position, more than any other role in football, is built on submission, discipline, and trust in authority, that's where this story gets uncomfortable. Because now, Shedeur Sanders isn't just a second-year quarterback trying to grow. He's the centerpiece of a cultural debate about leadership, obedience, and identity in the NFL. Let's rewind for a second and talk about Shedeur Sanders, the football player, not the symbol. In his debut campaign with the Browns, Shedeur started 8 games. He threw for 1,400 yards and 7 touchdowns. Those numbers aren't earth-shattering, but they tell part of a bigger story. He was learning on the fly. He was playing for a team that finished 5-12 and dead last in the AFC North. He was operating in an offense that never fully found its rhythm. And yet there were flashes. Poise in the pocket. Confidence under pressure. Leadership traits that don't show up in box scores. Now enter Todd Monken. Monken's track record speaks loudly. He's known for building offenses around his quarterback's strengths. He demands precision, accountability, and total buy-in. In Baltimore, his system unlocked efficiency and creativity. In Cleveland, he's being asked to do something even harder. Reshape a struggling franchise and mold a young quarterback into a long-term answer. That process requires trust. It requires submission in the purest football sense. Learning the system. Running the play that's called. Accepting coaching, even when it's harsh. That's the reality of quarterbacking in the NFL. And that's exactly what Jason Whitlock was pointing to when he said the position is best played by men willing to submit themselves to their head coach. But Emmanuel Acho sees it differently. His message wasn't subtle. He framed it as empowerment, as independence, as Shedeur Sanders not blindly following authority just because it exists. And for a lot of fans, that message sounded modern, bold, and socially aware. For others, it sounded reckless. This is where the curiosity gap widens. Because the real question isn't whether Shedeur Sanders should rebel or submit. The real question is what happens to a young quarterback caught between 2 powerful narratives before he's even had a chance to define himself. Think about the timing. New coach, new system, a franchise desperate for stability. And now, a national conversation suggesting that listening too closely to that coach might be a mistake. That's pressure you can't measure with statistics. Jason Whitlock believes this kind of messaging is dangerous. He argues that young quarterbacks need structure more than freedom early in their careers. He believes rebellion doesn't build champions. Discipline does. And in his view, Emmanuel Acho is selling a message that sounds good online, but doesn't work inside a locker room. Whitlock went as far as to say that Emmanuel Acho was trying to appeal to culture, to social media, to trends, rather than to the reality of football. He framed it as a continuation of a broader narrative encouraging young black men to reject authority. And whether you agree with Whitlock or not, his comments hit a nerve because they challenge a popular modern idea. Now here's the part nobody is really talking about yet. Shedeur Sanders hasn't publicly aligned himself with either side. He hasn't said he plans to rebel. He hasn't said he plans to blindly submit. He's been quiet, and that silence might be the smartest move of all. Because the truth is, Shedeur's career will be defined by what happens between the lines, not on debate shows. Todd Monken isn't asking Shedeur to abandon his identity. He's asking him to run an offense, to study film, to master details, to lead grown men. That's not oppression. That's professional football. At the same time, there's a legitimate conversation to be had about quarterbacks having agency, about not being treated as replaceable parts. The NFL has a long history of young quarterbacks being misused, mismanaged, and blamed. So when Emmanuel Acho raises questions about authority, he's tapping into a real fear shared by many players. This is why the debate exploded. It's not simple. It's not black and white. It's not rebellion versus obedience. It's about balance. And Shedeur Sanders is standing right in the middle of it. Remember, Cleveland is not Baltimore. Todd Monken doesn't walk into a ready-made powerhouse. He walks into a rebuilding project with a fan base that's tired of patient speeches. The Browns fired Kevin Stefanski because good wasn't good enough anymore. Stefanski's 45-56 record told the story. 2 playoff appearances in 6 years didn't move the needle. Cleveland wanted change. They wanted authority. They wanted a new voice. And now that voice belongs to Todd Monken. Whether Shedeur Sanders likes it or not, his future is tied to how that relationship develops. If he thrives, Monken looks like a genius hire. If he struggles, every word Emmanuel Acho and Jason Whitlock said will be replayed and reinterpreted, that there's also the shadow of Kevin Stefanski still hanging over this situation. Stefanski is already on to his next chapter as the new head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. His departure from Cleveland wasn't quiet. It was a signal that the Browns were done settling. And that raises the stakes for Shedeur even higher. He's not just developing. He's auditioning for the future of the franchise. Here's what makes this story fascinating. Quarterback development is as much psychological as it is physical. Confidence, trust, and clarity matter. When outside voices inject doubt about authority, it can fracture that clarity. When those voices demand submission without question, it can stifle growth. The best quarterbacks find a way to listen without losing themselves. So what does an ideal quarterback actually look like, as Whitlock described? In his view, it's someone who understands hierarchy. Someone who knows when to lead and when to follow. Someone who doesn't confuse submission with weakness. And historically, there's evidence to support that argument. The most successful quarterbacks in NFL history were obsessive students of their coaches' systems. But there's also evidence that blind obedience can fail. Systems change. Coaches get fired. And players are left picking up the pieces. Shedeur Sanders is smart enough to know that. Which is why reducing this to rebel or submit misses the point. The Browns' 5-12 record last season wasn't just about quarterback play. It was about instability, injuries, identity, and a lack of cohesion. Todd Monken was hired to fix that. And fixing that requires alignment from the quarterback position more than anywhere else. This is where I want to hear from you, because this isn't just a media argument. This is a football question with real consequences. Should a young quarterback like Shedeur Sanders fully submit to a new coach like Todd Monken to maximize his development? Or is Emmanuel Acho right to question authority before it defines your career? Where do you draw the line between empowerment and discipline? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this debate isn't going away. Not in Cleveland, not in the NFL, and not in the culture surrounding the league. One thing is certain. Shedeur Sanders' sophomore year just became must-watch television. Not because of touchdowns alone, but because every decision, every press conference, and every sideline interaction will now be viewed through this lens. Rebel or submit, empowerment or discipline, noise or focus. And somewhere between those extremes is a young quarterback trying to win football games. And here's the part that quietly makes this situation even more explosive. Shedeur Sanders is not a typical second-year quarterback. He carries a last name that already commands attention, expectations, and opinions. Everywhere he goes, narratives follow. Fair or not, he's judged not just on throws, but on leadership, attitude, and how he responds to authority. That reality makes this debate louder than it would be for almost any other young quarterback in the league. Todd Monken knows this too. He didn't take the Cleveland job expecting silence. He knew scrutiny would come with the territory. What he likely didn't expect was for the authority of his role to be questioned publicly before he even coached his first regular season snap. That changes the dynamic. Because now, how Shedeur responds to Monken isn't just about football development. It's about optics, about message, about whether the locker room sees unity or tension. Inside NFL buildings, these conversations matter more than fans realize. Veterans watch how young quarterbacks interact with coaches. They notice body language. They hear whispers. If a quarterback appears resistant to coaching, that trust erodes quickly. And for a team coming off a 5-12 season, trust is already fragile. This is why Jason Whitlock's comments, controversial as they are, resonate with certain segments of the football world. Coaches and executives value order. They value players who absorb coaching and execute without ego. They believe that rebellion, even subtle, can poison a locker room before wins have a chance to fix anything. But here's the counterweight. The NFL is evolving. Quarterbacks are brands now. They are leaders with platforms. They are expected to think, speak, and sometimes challenge systems that don't work. Emmanuel Acho's message, whether you agree with it or not, reflects that evolution. It's rooted in the idea that blind loyalty has historically failed many talented players. Shedeur Sanders stands at a crossroads that feels bigger than Cleveland. One path says, buy in completely, trust Todd Monken, and let the system mold you. The other says, protect your voice, question what doesn't feel right, and never surrender control of your career. The truth is, success probably lives somewhere in between. What makes this season fascinating is that we're going to see the answer play out in real time. Every interception will spark commentary. Every touchdown will be framed as validation. If Shedeur takes a leap, Monken gets credit and Whitlock's argument gains strength. If he stalls, Emmanuel Acho's warning will resurface instantly. This is why this isn't just another Browns storyline. It's a referendum on how young quarterbacks navigate power in today's NFL. It's about whether discipline still wins championships or whether autonomy is the new edge. And by the end of this season, Shedeur Sanders won't just have stats. He'll have defined which voice mattered most.